Hi, I'm John Tickles, and welcome to Remote RPGs. People give sequels a lot of crap. Zelda 2, Mario 2, Castlevania 2, the Mario Party games, Pokemon, Mega Man games, everything. Either the sequel is too different or too much like the original. And few games manage to reach that sweet in-between. Sadly, Tales of Symphonia, Dawn of the New World is not one of them. I absolutely adore the original game, and the sequel does many things similarly and has some cool changes, but it dropped the ball in a lot of places. You may be asking how I plan to pass off the sequel of one of the most well-loved GameCube games of all time as Remote. Well, have you heard of this game? I didn't. I was a huge fan of the original, and I never even saw it in stores until years after its release here in Canada. The game didn't make much of a splash, and now it's time to see why. Let's not get ahead of ourselves though. Let's talk about Tales of Symphonia, Dawn of the New World for the Nintendo Wii. Released in 2008 by Namco Bandai, the sequel to Tales of Symphonia takes place 2 years after the original story, where the two worlds, Tethe'alla and Sylvarant, have merged thanks to the efforts of Lloyd and company. However, all is not well in this world, as there is a race struggle between the two peoples. The environment is in chaos and monsters are appearing everywhere. There's a giant conflict between the Sylvaranti and the Vanguards, an insurgency, against the Church and the Tethe'allans. From here it gets even more complicated. I summon the mighty forces of Wikipedia to help me complete the plot synopsis. The game begins when the Church of Martel goes to war with the Vanguard, and Sylvarant's city of Palmacosta is caught in the crossfire. Countless innocent lives are lost, and the city is consumed in flames. This event comes to be known as the Blood Purge, a massacre allegedly led by the same Lloyd Irving who helped unite the worlds 2 years before. Emil, a Palmacostian boy, is forced to watch as his parents are killed by Lloyd. At the same time, a girl named Marta is fleeing the Vanguard with Ratatosk's core, an orb that contains the essence of a sleeping spirit. Cornered by the Vanguard soldiers, she appeals to Ratatosk for help, and awakens to see Emil standing over her foes' bodies. 6 months later, Emil now lives in Luton to live with his aunt and uncle, who abuse him physically and emotionally. He is also bullied by the people of the city, who view Lloyd as a hero thanks to Lloyd's efforts 2 years ago. However, while investing local meteorological disturbances, he encounters Marta, who helps him defend himself from some monsters and then flees from her pursuers, both Vanguard and the enigmatic Richter. Richter is a source of confusion to Emil. He speaks brusquely, but encourages him to stand up for himself. Richter is attempting to retrieve Ratatosk's core, which is bonded physically to Marta and is only visible as a glyph on her forehead. Emil decides to help Marta. With the aid of Tenebrae, a Centurion spirit who serves Ratatosk, Emil pledges himself as a Knight of Ratatosk, gaining a direct link to the summoned spirit and a second hyper-aggressive personality, which aids him in battle. That's a doozy of a tale, but it's kind of what you'd expect from a Tales game. I'm going to talk about the characters, and this will be short but a little brutal. Ladies and gentlemen, I really don't like our protagonist Emil. He is honestly the biggest friggin' pansy in RPG history, and probably my pick for the worst protagonist. This kid barely stands up for himself, he's got no spine, and he barely changes for a good portion of the game. They tried to give him a character arc, and it kind of works, but it doesn't really feel well-paced or very gradual. The main point is, do you want to play as a pussy like this?
Never mind. You know, you should stand up for yourself.
I was too scared to even thank him for that. Maybe that's why I haven't been able to make any friends. I wish I had friends, but I guess that'll never happen.
Never mind. You know, you should stand up for yourself.
You'll just get in the way. Stay here.
Do you want to imagine yourself as a screechy little baby? I'm sorry, I don't. To be fair, he does have his moments, and I understand why he is the way he is, but I just found him incredibly aggravating to play as. Our female lead, Marta, doesn't do much to improve things. She's not bad, don't get me wrong, but she don't impress me much. I liked her upbeat attitude and cheerfulness as opposed to Emil's pessimism, but she just isn't terribly memorable. And those are the only new playable characters, I kid you not, and I'll explain why in a bit. The other major characters are Richter, a dude who's after Marta and all philosophical.
Courage is the magic that turns dreams into reality.
Huh?
What you talking about, Willis?
Courage is the magic that turns dreams into reality.
Gay!
Kind of evil, but kind of not. It's hard to explain. And that's basically it. Unless you count Emil's other personality, his Ratatosk mode, which is this aggressive badass that Emil becomes for some reason they explain later. But I think this guy should have been the lead. He was a lot cooler. And that's basically it for newer characters. Aside from these two dingbats that chase you around picking fights, they don't pose much of a threat. Oh wow, this review is coming out a lot more negative than I expected, and I kinda like this game. But when I look at it objectively, years later, the problems can't be ignored. So sorry if this stays negative, but I'm just being critical, and know that this isn't really a bad game. It's just kinda disappointing as a sequel to one of my favorite titles of all time. With that being said, let me explain why the story and the characters in this game do not work well. The plot of the game is a great setup. New characters, our beloved Lloyd is a murderer, and multiple personalities? Good stuff. There are even a few neat little plot twists sprinkled throughout the game. However, when it comes down to it, the story made three fundamental mistakes. Firstly, it mostly revolves around Emil and Marta's love story. Listen, I'm not a heartless dick, most of the time. I like a good romance. I think The Notebook was only kind of shit, and Titanic is a solid movie. Hell, I don't even mind the story in Final Fantasy VIII. But goddamn, this love story is bad. And that's not good considering the whole game revolves around it. A lot of the focus is on Emil and Marta's budding relationship, but you can barely buy it. She falls for him almost immediately, trying to jump on his piece like he's the last guy on the planet, and he really doesn't fall for her, but gets sucked into her insanity. But the point is, there's no real chemistry between these two. It doesn't really feel genuine. Unlike Lloyd and Colette, who have a genuine friendship that buds into something more, you barely see anything with these two except the idea of opposites attracting. This and the fact that all they do is get into arguments and apologize over and over and over again. It's so boring and tedious to watch them, and the game focuses so much on it. I don't know, it just seemed like a weird direction to take. The second problem with the story is that it's only Emil and Marta on this quest, pretty much. That's it. No new playable characters other than those two. Instead, what happens is that old characters from the first game pop in as playable characters. Yeah, it's nice to see them, but couldn't we get a new party? I love these characters, but it feels kind of gimmicky when they all return and basically, plot-wise, they all do the same thing. Oh, you guys should be my new friends. Oh, you think Lloyd is a bad guy? Nah, bro, he's a solid guy. Okay, goodbye after a few hours. And that's it. And even more insulting, the levels of these characters are actually locked at a certain level, and they're only temporary. And that just seems cruel, especially because you guys are leaving us with a meal. The third problem is that the whole story feels kinda like filler. It took around 50 to 60 hours to beat Tales of Symphonia. It was a big quest, a big world, and a big story. On the other hand, the sequel only takes about 20 hours, the quest is more of a fetch quest, and the world is almost recycled from the first game. The story is pretty poorly paced, and mostly focuses on Emil apologizing. Those are the three major problems with this game's story. Again, it's nothing awful, but not what you'd expect from a sequel to arguably the best RPG on the GameCube. As I said, the characters aren't bad, aside from Emil in my opinion, but they all pretty much have one trait and change only a little and rather sporadically. To find some positives, I like how Marta and Emil do kind of learn from each other, and I like how the game expands on the characters from the first game with the screen time they do have. You'll be happy to know that everything aside from the story and characters is very good in this game, so you no longer have to hear me complain like a goddamn fanboy. Being a Tales game, Dawn of the New World has a lot to see and do. There's character titles and cooking, if you're into that. One thing about the exploration I didn't like was the lack of world map to explore. All you get are locations you click and go to. What fun is that? This is an RPG, it's about exploration. I heard they actually ran out of time for making this feature, so I guess I should let it go, but it would have extended the game time and made it feel a lot bigger. The battle system in Dawn of a New World is one of the few areas where the game improves over its predecessor, for the most part. Firstly, this is your pretty typical RPG system. Equipment, although you only really have to equip Emil and Marta, experience, and all that jazz. I'm actually happy to say that the Wii controls aren't shoved in your face like commission-based workers. They're used a little here and there, but I never noticed them too much. The combat is actually pretty much the same action RPG style as the original title, except here you have a lot more freedom to move around the battlefield, as opposed to the stricter stop the battle and select the target style of the original. Another returning feature that I was happy to see was the multiplayer action, where my younger brother and I had a blast playing through these battles. I made him play as Marta, but sadly it wasn't long before I realized that I definitely got stuck with the more feminine character. Battles are fast paced, there's a lot of customization here, and you even get some enemy companions to fight with you. It was a lot of fun. You get these cool dual arts. It's like a really flashy, fast, enjoyable battle system. My only major complaints are that the difficulty is kind of poorly paced, with some battles being extremely tough, and battles that should be hard, like the final battle, being pretty easy. My other complaint was that Emil and Marta were the only characters you can level up or customize. It's too simple to only really have two characters to manage and command, so I wasn't really a fan of that. That, and the characters kept coming and going depending on the story, making it hard to get attached to anybody. The graphics in the game are pretty great. Everything is very colorful, clean, and there are a lot of amazing locations. Of course, these locations are basically high-definition versions of the ones from Tales of Symphonia, but still good looking. I didn't even mind the character designs that much, they were pretty solid. It's a really visually appealing game. The music is pretty good as well. There's a lot of really catchy tracks that stick with you well after you're done. The opening theme, I'll Go, from Dark Side, and Shining Dew were all some of my favorites. And unlike the original game, this soundtrack felt like it had a better scope and had more variety. It's also nice to note that the voice acting in this game is really good. They weren't able to get all the original voice actors back, but this was still great because there's a lot more voice acting in this game, and they even fully voiced the skits now. Believe it or not, I find Emil's voice kind of annoying though. Is anyone else tired of hearing me complain about this guy? No? Okay, I'll keep going. In conclusion, Tales of Symphonia Dawn of the New World is a solid Wii title, but it feels a little too average. The story and the characters are pretty weak, but the gameplay, music, and graphics are all pretty good. So if you like the original game, then you should play this one because it does expand on the story and characters, but in my opinion, you should prepare for some disappointment. You know, it might just be my opinion, but they didn't do much for me. For action RPG fans looking for a new Wii title, this one isn't bad if you can find it for 20 bucks or something. Oh, you should just include another 50 bucks for the Talonal you'll need to deal with Emil. You really should just pick up the new version for the PS3, cause that's a pretty good deal compared to what you'll find online. Well, that's all for now. I'm John Tickles, and I look forward to our next random encounter.
Courage is the magic that turns dreams into reality.
What in God's holy name are you blathering about?